To talk about what is next for Vega. My name is Christian van Boven. I'm a principal product manager. I work in Amazon offices in Madrid. And I'll talk a lot about performance, as the image is showing. It's one of our themes of what we've tried to achieve in Vega. So, Vega OS was announced on 30th of September, very, very recent. What is very peculiar is it has React Native inside, and that has brought a lot of challenges. So today I really want to look behind the curtain of what you can expect to come next. And there's three themes I will talk about here. One is performance, as I already started talking about. The next one is developer experience and tooling. And then there's React Native. We are still on a somewhat old version of React Native, so I want to look a little bit in the future, what you can expect from us next year. So let's start with performance. I want to look very briefly at our recent achievements. If we look back, one of our customers asked us to be able to make the whole user experience more interactive, and concurrent rendering was one of the things we found to be particularly important. Concurrent rendering was one of the things we brought into Vega at the beginning of this year to make the UX responsive when there's heavy rendering happening. A lot of times we have complex screens, a lot of things that need to be re-rendered. And so this was making sure that people using a remote control were going to have that good experience. Once we had implemented concurrent rendering, we still had a few customers in the US that were complaining about slowness of navigating across a screen. So one of the things is that we were able to use concurrent rendering to batch together blur and focus. So typically when you navigate around on a TV interface, you will first blur, you will defocus from one cell and then focus on the next cell. But in our initial implementation, that was actually taking 2 rendering steps, and that was making the whole navigation very slow. So using concurrent rendering and having the control of how all the events were actually going into the render cycle, it allowed us to decrease the focus time change by about 50%. Other improvements that we did much more recently was to optimize some of the libraries of React Native. One of those libraries is Masked View, and some of our partners that were using Masked View were seeing this being very slow. We re-architected the way that Masked View was running on Vega by rendering it all through the GPU. So we moved all the load from the CPU to the GPU, and that improved the frame time, the time to render a frame by about 70%. So for this particular partner, this made a huge difference. So that was some of the things that we've done, and these were mostly invisible for app developers. One thing that we've also seen is URL. URL in React Native is a little bit of a pain. It is a very slow polyfill on most platforms. So one of the things we did was to replace this polyfill with optimized code, which is not 30% better, but it's 30 times faster, so it's very relevant. And that's something that is coming in the next release. So for people that have a lot of URL functions, that will be very significant. One other thing we already did, this was a feedback from one of our partners here in Europe, was the URL search parameters. The parsing of URL strings was particularly slow. We brought that into a native turbo module, and that sped it up by about 20 times, so 20 times faster. So that's already there if you're using this functionality. We had some of our partners using this very heavily. That made a lot of difference as well. Another function that is typically very slow in Hermes and in React Native is the date function. We found out that that is mostly due because a lot of recalculation happens every single time you call that function. It recalculates it based on the time zone. It's a very slow process, so you can obviously cache time zone because you're not running around with your Fire TV device from one time zone to the other. And so we actually managed to see a 9 times improvement on that function as well. So you can see these are all huge speed ups. So we're still at a phase where there's some of these large improvements that we're doing. So how can you actually improve your apps, and how can you figure out what is working and what is not working? We're still trying to do a lot of stuff that you can find on our portal. One of those first ones is the KPIs. We are now putting a lot of new KPIs in terms of debugging consecutive frame drops. So we have actually found that individual frame drops don't matter as much. But of course, if you have multiple frames that are dropping in a row, that's very impactful. And so we have new KPIs that allow you to detect that. We also found that the user experience is very dependent on input key latency. So we have new KPIs that have come in our latest SDK release, .21. You may also ask, okay, I have a KPI on a slow loading of one screen. How can I break it down? Well, we have also introduced micro KPIs that allow you to break down where exactly this time is accumulating, so that you have a better insight. And in the near future, our next version, in .22, you will see new KPIs for video playback coming in, so you will have more ways to measure the time for that video playback. Other improvements we've done is we have brought out-of-the-box support for Perfetto, which is a tool that many people are familiar with in terms of performance. And we will be bringing new guidelines in the next release for overdraw impact. Overdraw is when you do multiple re-renders of one UI screen, and we will have better guidelines to help you to improve on that as well. So we've talked a bit about performance and what you can expect in the very near term in terms of performance. Now let's look at developer experience and tools. So what is actually coming next? One of the exciting things that is coming is we will have a beta to build an app using AI tools, and it will also include things for diagnosing where your app is not going that well. I already talked about the fluidity KPIs in some of the previous slides. And one improvement on the simulator on the virtual device is you will see support for launcher. So in your virtual device, you will be able to simulate how you go from a launcher, from the home screen, to your app. What is the app launch experience? What is going to look like, which is something we don't do at the moment. We also will try to still tweak a little bit more our existing capabilities. Today, if you're developing and you switch from USB to TCP and you lose the connection on TCP, you have to factory reset your device and go back to USB. That's a bit painful, so we want to improve on that. We'll also, more significantly, we'll try to bring you a very easy single-click approach to symbolicate any crashes and make it much faster to see that crash information. Early next year, you will see improvements coming in log parsing. So right now, if you look at logs, you get lots of logs from both OS and your app, which might be confusing. So we'll try to make it simpler and give you more focus on the app-specific logs. So those are all incremental improvements of what we have already today. One thing we want to do is we want to allow you to bring production devices with newer builds. So in the future, we still expect our OS to evolve. So we want you to be able to take a device that you've bought online or in a store. We want you to be able to migrate that to a beta version. If we are working on a new feature that is not yet on consumer devices, we will allow you to update those devices with beta builds. So that will be easier rather than a lot of the manual stuff we've been doing so far. Last week, we had a workshop at the React Native conference in London, which is the first time we had people playing with our new AI agents. Already today, you could take Vega Studio and you can bring in whatever agent that you want. But what I will be talking about today is that we will have specific MCP servers that know the details of Vega, and that will help you to create apps on Vega and to diagnose them. So again, as we showed at the conference last week, and as you've seen some other examples here earlier today, we will provide very soon a Vega MCP server. It will allow you to build an app, but it will go beyond that. It will also allow you to ask why your app is slow to start up. So it will help you to debug the performance on fluidity, on UI, on time to first frame, time to first draw. So it will help you to analyze that. It will point you to the right commands to do crash debugging, whether it's symbolication or finding what is the crash origination. It will point you in the right direction. It will give you a step-by-step approach on how to do that. It will also have all the best practices, so it will integrate all of our documentation, and it will point you also to any anti-patterns that we are not recommending that you would take. Very important, this is a very, very early prototype. This is a beta, so we will welcome your feedback, what is working, what is not working. We had already very good feedback from the workshops we've been doing in the past few weeks. We encourage you to come back to us and tell us what is working, what is not working. MCP server will be a downloadable NPM package, and this is not just for Amazon AI tools. This can be used by any AI coding agent, right? So whatever AI tool that can use the tools primitive, we will be fine. And this MCP server will be able to address the CLI tools, so it will be a more convenient way of using CLI tools and have AI scripts to run you through. So that's what you can expect, and step by step we'll go and iterate that in the next few months. One concern that we've heard from some partners is, fine, I've built my Vega app, now how am I going to reuse that investment? I've built a new code base in React Native. How can I best leverage that across different platforms? So in the very near future, we will provide more guidelines for both greenfield and brownfield deployments. You've seen some examples of what the brownfield approach could be like for those people that were in the earlier session. And we will give migration paths from a Vega code base if you want to use that in other platforms. We told you already about AI tooling, so the MCP servers will know about the TV Vega specifics, but also about generic React Native. And it will give you some assessment of what APIs are compatible and how you could migrate from one platform to another. And one thing we are working on is that you will have the same Amazon features on both Fire OS and Vega. So if you want to use in-app purchase, we want to make it as seamless as possible that you can have the exact same code, whether it's Fire OS devices or whether it's Vega devices. And then last but not least, on React Native. React Native on Vega today, it covers about 80% of all the React Native core components and APIs. We have short-term plans to improve some gaps that we still have, whether it's on text input, scroll view, or an API we were missing, which is measure in window, which may be useful in some use cases. One thing we also don't do yet on React Native in Vega is density-independent pixels, which you might be probably using for all other platforms, but not yet on Vega. So we want to make it easy for you to code, to reuse your code. So this is one of the initiatives we have going on. And then a question that some of you may have is, fine, we're on React Native 72, but we want to go to a newer version. So our next target is 0.83. I know 0.83 doesn't even exist, but there is release candidates out there. We're already integrating those release candidates. We are working on improving the developer experience. We expect a quite big jump in terms of performance, components, APIs, and we will be working together with the library maintainers to also bring it up to the new version of community libraries. So we expect the benefits to be, first of all, developer experience. In this version, we will bring the React Native Dev Tools, which is a significant improvement from what we had in 72. As Amazon, we worked with Meta and Software Mansion to deliver something called the JS Stable API, which is the strict TypeScript API. The benefit of that will be that your app will not have to be rewritten as much as it used to be in the past. There was lots of API changes in React Native, and we're bringing that more to a stable API in this version. And of course, with this newer version of React Native, you will get DOM APIs and you will get React 19 with all the benefits that those bring as well. Performance, so you can expect improvements in terms of build times. You can expect runtime performance because in this version of React Native, you will have the support for microtasks, and we'll have the new version of Hermes, the Hermes V1, which will be part of this version as well. And finally, React Native is evolving to become more and more aligned with web layout, things like CSS. So in the newer versions of React Native, you see improved support for CSS. We'll do a lot of significant upgrades to libraries. For example, Reanimated, which is Reanimated 3, we'll take that to Reanimated 4, just to give you one example. So, summarizing everything I said, what does it mean for you? What do we think, how can you benefit from it, or what you can work on? First of all, in terms of performance, I think I've tried to show you a few of the new tools that we bring. We think that performance is never finished. We can always do better. So we have worked with a lot of partners to profile the apps to find areas where we can optimize. We're also bringing new KPIs, as I mentioned. So with those new KPIs and with our guidelines, I think we can help and we can work together to continue to improve performance. We have MCP. You can already start by downloading the tarball if you want to, if you cannot wait until our next version of the SDK. It's out there. Definitely you can expect all of that to be rolled into our next version of .22. We'll keep on the feedback going, just like what we did before even the device launch. And one thing I would strongly encourage you is to review if your React Native app is fully compliant with the new architecture. The new version, our next version, which will be 83, will not allow anymore to work with the legacy architecture of React Native. So you need to make sure that you're fully on the new architecture. I know a lot of the app developers are working currently, but that will be very interesting. And also, if you want to be future-proof in React Native, you should review if you're using any deep imports or if you can follow the new strict TypeScript API. It will also make your app more robust for any changes. And finally, you can expect more Fire TV devices coming next year. And as I explained, you will be able to reuse also your Vega code for other devices with the improvements that we discussed before.